So this is 1 Kings 17. I want to read a little bit, back up, and cover the text here through reading it that was just brought up before us. 1 Kings 17, verse 1, it says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to King Ahab," that wicked king we talked about last night, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Leave here, turn eastward, go and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. You're going to drink from a brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." And so Elijah did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. He stayed there, and sure enough, the ravens, they brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from that brook. And yet sometime later, this is verse 7, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah again. "Now go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there, for now I've directed a widow to supply you with food." And so Elijah went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and he asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I might have a drink?" And as she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." "And as surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread. I only have a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm actually gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, that jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." And so she went away and did as Elijah had told her. And so there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family, for the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. You know, last night we had this moment, and Matt did a great job of calling us into the story, this whole theme of to be continued. And it's not just a cliffhanger, it is this commandment in which God is saying, I want to invite you into this story that I am writing. And first and foremost, so that you hear the story of what God is doing through Jesus Christ, that you might be able to be rescued, because He's the way, the truth, and the life. And some of those themes will come up throughout this week. But at the heart of it also is God is saying, I am continuing to write my story, and I'm not just going to write you into it by rescuing you, but I want to write it through you. I want to use you so that my kingdom, my rule and reign, the beauty of who I am and the life I've called us to live can break into this world a little bit more. And that's this call of to be continued. We step into the story. And what we're doing this week is we are taking a look at a guy in the Old Testament by the name of Elijah who sensed the call of God for him to step into the story. And we're looking in on his life because we want to listen to his life, because we want to see what it looks like to step into the story. Because really, what we see in Elijah might go a long way into whether or not we're going to want to step into the story. And what's beautiful in the story of Elijah, and this is where we start in this whole journey, in this narrative, in this story of this interesting little prophet, we start with this very base level idea that when you step into the story that God is wanting to write through you, you can trust that God will provide. Man, that's what's stated. I mean, you listen to the story as I read it, that what we learn from this is you step in the story, God will provide the needs that you have. And it is stunning. It is spectacular, the way that God provides for Elijah. I mean, for goodness sakes, in this moment, when a drought has settled in on the Middle Eastern land, and there's not going to be water, God said, don't worry, there's a brook that I will have you drink from. And don't worry, on the other side of this drought, when we don't have the land producing the crops and the food that's needed, I will actually send ravens. Ravens will be dive bombing you in the morning and at night, carrying meat and bread in its beaks so that you never go hungry. And then when the brook dries up, it's as if God is saying, no, seriously, you can trust me to provide for you when you step into my story. He sends them off into this region of Sidon, this village of Zarephath. And he said, when you get there, you're going to bump into this widow who's just kind of hobbling her way through life. He said, you're going to meet her and she's going to tell you she's only got a pinch of flour and a splash of oil. But for the next 3 years, both of those jars will never run out. Every single day, not only for you, but for her and for her son, there will be fresh, baked, warm bread on the table. Because you can trust that I will provide, is what God is saying to Elijah. And it's a stunning, spectacular thing here that we have established as we're stepping into the story of Elijah's story. And yet I am absolutely convinced that some of you, when I sit here and say you can step into the story of God and you can trust that He will provide for you, your immediate response is, well, we'll see. We'll see. Because here's the thing, Brian, that story is very Bible-y. And I mean, of course it is. It's in the Bible. But you know what I mean by Bible-y is, of course, that was then, this is now. That's for Elijah, this is for me. And you got these dive-bombing birds and this widow with a pinch of flour and a splash of oil, bread for 3 years. That's a very Bible-y kind of thing. That's a spectacular thing. How on earth am I ever going to believe that those kinds of things are going to happen for me today, in my context, in my place, in my home, in my school? We'll see if God will provide. Man, in some ways, when you raise all of those things that I just raised, those are the same kind of things that sometimes I will raise in my life. And I go looking for the spectacular at times by the hand of God and His power. And in some ways, when we wonder whether or not that will happen, we are right to wonder that. And yet, bottom baseline, we are wrong to ever question whether or not God can be trusted to provide. We will see. Guys, I have seen. I've seen. In the summer of 2015, my wife and my daughter, who was 5 at the time, we accepted the invitation to go minister in a church in Florida. It was a church that was running about 200 people, but it wasn't doing terribly well. And we knew that going in. The guy who had started the church was leaving. There were a lot of people tired. It had been a church plant, living there for 6 years, and church planting is hard. We've done it on the west side of Indianapolis. It's incredibly hard. And the people were tired. And we knew this going in, but we accepted the invitation to go there and to serve in this church. But I got to tell you, about 3 days before we're going to get in the moving truck and go down there, I get a phone call from one of the elders of the church and says, I just want you to know that we're actually now running under 100 people. Oh, so we're down about 150. Yeah. Giving is in a ditch. We don't have any money. We heard the movie theater that we're meeting in is about to kick us out, and we're pretty sure there's some more people that are going to want to leave because they're just tired. And then he added this, I would not question you at all if you were questioning whether or not you should come, and if you don't want to come, I understand. And I thought, well, we're off to a great start. But the thing is that I'm standing in my living room, everything I own is in boxes. We've got a moving truck coming, and I said, we are going to come, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to step into the story of this whole thing, right? And when we got there, let me tell you something. You talk about Florida's paradise. Florida was a wilderness for me and my family. Man, we got down there, and I don't know what numbers he was crunching to see just a little under 100. I looked out and saw maybe 50 people the first day there, and they were tired, man. And you could break that group into thirds. A third of the people were wondering whether or not they wanted to stay because they liked the last guy. That happens. Another third of the group is saying, no, you know what, we're going to stay and we're all in. But then there was another third that was just saying, we're going to see how all of this shakes out, and we'll make a call pretty soon. This is just not a good situation. But within the first month of us being there, 2 key leaders had to move back up north to be with family because of health crises. Then soon after that, we got booted out of the movie theater because they wanted to start showing early showings, especially in conjunction with the release of the last Hunger Games. So thanks, Katniss, right? So we get kicked out of the movie theater. We have nowhere to go. We find a place. It's really expensive, but we lose people, more people, in moving to this other location. And then that means giving goes more into a ditch. And then we realize we can't afford this place, so then we go to another place. But then people say, I don't want to drive 5 more minutes. This is Florida. They're pretty chill down there. I don't want to drive 5 more minutes, so then we lose more people. And then I've got a group of people who will go off and they think to themselves, you know what, we never really liked it here anyway, let's go start a church. So then we lose more people to another church. And then I got to tell you, just a few weeks after that, finally, about a year and a half later of slugging it out, we closed the church. It was just such a toxic situation, honestly, that we just needed to shut it down and send out the people. Seems like a really good time for me to stop and say, congratulations, I'm your encounter speaker. We closed a church. It was one of the most terrifying moments. I've got a daughter who is 6.5 at the time that's looking at me and asking me, why did we move down here? Frank, I'm sitting there, I don't know. But I got to tell you, in those moments, what happens is I'm sitting here and I'm reading the story, and it's the same story we're looking at this morning. I'm saying, okay, God, so here's the thing. Now I have stepped into the days of Elijah in my own life. Can I trust you to provide? Well, did I wake up in the morning? We don't have ravens in Florida, I don't think. There's probably ravens somewhere. We have these things called sandhill cranes. If you haven't seen those things, there's these large gray birds. They look like pterodactyls. They're kind of terrifying. But I wake up in the morning and I could then, behold, I turn to my wife and say, behold, Sarah, the sandhill cranes have brought us biggie bags from Wendy's. It did not happen. I mean, is there a moment where I met some neighbor and I go out and here I am and I am in need? I've stepped in the story and I've been faithful. Did I meet some neighbor who had a magical cupboard that would produce food both for them and for me? That didn't happen. Did I go down to a gas station to get a scratch off and make $1 million? Did I land a job? I could go on and all of these things that I was spying for, looking for, that were spectacular and that were stunning. And these things did not happen. But I have seen the hand of a God who provides. And a guy who makes his way over to me and says, you know what, I teach at a Christian school. I heard about your situation. Man, you want to come do some substitute teaching? I'll have you come preach the student revival. We'll pay you this way. In fact, I just want to overpay you for it because, man, you guys have been through a lot. I remember one day there was a knock on our door, and it's another guy from a church that we had started to attend there on the other side of the closing of the church. He just handed me an envelope and he walked away. I didn't know this guy hardly all opened. It was $500. Another time we have a church over at our house and we're having a small group meeting and we're having a meal together, and after they leave, it's at Christmas time. We go to put things away and we notice behind the nativity set someone, I don't know who it was out of the group, had rolled up 2 $100 bills and just tucked them back behind there. We got a note in the mail from someone. It was a $500 check that just simply said, we know, we've been there. We had 2 of the most dearest people in our life call me and my wife and say, we are paying your rent every single month until things settle down. And man, when I was thinking about this, going back through this story of Elijah, and my wife and I were talking back through this, we sat there and we wept. Because there aren't these moments always in life. In fact, sometimes we set you up to only look for the most spectacular of things, when the story of Scripture, the most prevailing story, is that God is providing for you every day in the most subtle and consistent ways that, in my opinion, are no less spectacular. In fact, this is what moves me so much about this passage. Now, this isn't a passage that was assigned to me by CIY. I'm going outside of my passage. Don't tell them. But in 1 Kings 17, you do have one prophet, Elijah, and he's having those dive-bombing birds give him the meat and the bread. And yet if you go one chapter over, I think I'm more moved by what happens in 1 Kings chapter 18, because it's more up my alley. It's more what you're going to see, because I can't tell you, it's more of what I've seen. You've got this odd little fellow by the name of Obadiah. Some people argue it's the Obadiah of the Old Testament. What we know here is he's the administrative assistant of Ahab. And yet where Ahab was wicked, Obadiah was a godly man. And it says in the day where Jezebel starts to slay the prophets of God, kill them in mass, it says Obadiah took 100 prophets of the Lord and he hid them in 2 different caves, 50 and 50. So if she found 150, at least we have 50 more. That's how dangerous it was. But Obadiah realized, if I put these 100 prophets in these caves, what will they eat and what will they drink? And there were no ravens for them. You know who they had? They had Obadiah. It says in the text in 1 Kings 18 that every single day Obadiah would come to the mouth of the cave and he would deliver bread and he would deliver water. And what happens here is, for one prophet, these spectacular things happen. But I will tell you, most of you, your stories will be like the other 100 prophets, where what you will behold is the church having your back. And we have your back. In fact, it's the beauty of what happens, I think, in the New Testament. It's very rare that people just get delivered in some miraculous way, bread and the things that they need provided for them. The provision of God is not always in the most spectacular ways. In fact, what Jesus does is he transforms us into a people to make sure that we are not only taking care of our own, but even for those who are not yet our own. So that in the end, all the people may say that even if they aren't being dive-bombed by birds, it is still by the hand of God they are being provided for. Man, there's not too many guarantees that I can make for you in a sermon. I try to be careful about that. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver rather than over-promise and under-deliver. But I'm 41 years old. I know I'm old. How am I even alive? I'm 41 years old. And I can already tell you and guarantee for you that there will be moments that you look back on your life and you will marvel at all of the ways that God has provided in light of the faithfulness of you stepping into a story. He will not leave you hanging. And you can trust that God will provide for you. See, that's the whole idea we're trying to get. It's not just, hey, God will provide. No, you can trust. You can believe in this. You can set your watch to it that he is going to provide for you. And really why this is true, I mean, two reasons come to mind for me. One of them is very simply this. It's because God wants to be glorified as God. God wants to be praised as God. It was brought up in the video right before I started speaking. The guy said, man, it's significant for God to send Elijah out into the heart of Baal worship. Baal, the god, was the god of fertility. This is the god who would produce livestock, who would produce grain and wheat and all the things that were needed for food, right? And yet they're in the midst of a drought. Baal's not coming through for them. But one of the reasons why God provides for Elijah, but not just Elijah, but a woman who's not a Jewish woman, someone who rests outside of the nation of Israel, he provides for them too, so that he's making this very clear statement. I am the one true God. One of the major reasons why God will make sure he comes through for you is because he wants everyone, including yourself, looking in on your life to recognize there is only one God, and it's the one who's providing this for me. And he wants all people to know that. It's significant that he is not just doing this for Elijah. This is not just a story about Elijah being provided for. It is also a story of that widow being provided for, in which God is trying to plant a seed by when he's providing for all of them so that all might one day believe. In fact, guys, this is fascinating. Man, you fast forward all the way into the New Testament, Matthew chapter 15. This is also found in Mark chapter 7. There is a moment where Jesus goes into guess what region? The region of Sidon. Zarephath is located in there somewhere, and a woman comes up to Jesus and cries out to him. She calls him Lord. And there's no reason for her to believe in him at this point, but she does. And the reason why I think she comes to the Lord to be able to deliver her, for Jesus to deliver her daughter, who it says in the text is demon-possessed, is because hundreds of years prior, by God providing for Elijah, and maybe someone in the vicinity of where this woman lives 100 years later, that seed has been planted. I'll tell you who the one true God is. And so when Jesus comes on the scene, she knows exactly who to go to. Man, you can trust that God will provide because God is working hard to make a name for himself. But you can trust God to provide because he loves you. Man, that's really what it all comes down to. He loves you. There's such tenderness all throughout 1 Kings 17. Man, go here, Elijah. I love, go here, go here. I provide. I'm directing all of these things for you. Because he's our Father. And I was thinking about this again because we have Father's Day. I was thinking about the Lord's Prayer. When we cry out, Jesus says, give us this day our daily bread. That the only way that we can cry that out without blushing and being almost embarrassed by it is because of where we start in the prayer. Our Father. Our Father is a good Father who loves his children. Man, throughout this week, you've got this railroad switch over here, and from time to time, you're going to be allowed to interact with that thing, and you'll just want to pull that when you make a decision this week. They're going to talk more about it tonight, but I know one of the reasons that when you go to pull this thing, and in a very tangible way to make a decision, what's going to make you want to pull back your hand is whether or not you think God's got your back to provide for you. Man, I can't always tell you you're going to be blown away by the ways that he provides. But you will be carried along. You can trust that God will provide. Let's stand and worship.